Good afternoon and welcome to the Sunshine Coast Regional District Budget Committee meeting for Thursday, November 20th, 2025. It's 1 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the traditional territories of the Shishel and Squamish Nations. Directors, we do have an amended agenda in front of us, replacing Report 4.3, which is the North Pender Harbor Water Service item. Directors, are there any other changes to make to the agenda today? If not, can I have a motion to adopt as amended, please? Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And we're going to move straight into item 4.1, which is updated water service fees. And GM Rosenboom, I assume since you're sitting there, you're leading this one?
Thank you. Yes, I will. Thank you, Chair. As part of our update and review of bylaw 422, our water service, water rates and regulation bylaw, we've also reviewed our fees schedule that is related to property-specific fees. So these are fees that are being charged when an individual or property owner requests a service from the SRD. Those services are being provided on a daily basis. However, the related fees have not been updated since 1995. So the schedule as included in the agenda has substantial increases for some of the fees and has some new fees included. And the substantial increases are primarily related to external factors like we're now are installing water meters on every property, where there is definitely inflation happening. There's definitely an increase in archaeological requirements, as well as regulatory requirements, particularly in terms of paving requirements, if we need to do something. So the fees proposed are not a minimum that a service installation actually cost. For example, in terms of service connection fees, it's also definitely not the maximum, because we have had over the last year service connections that were costing us in the order of $25,000 to $30,000, and in this case we're proposing to charge $5,500 to $6,000 for such a connection. So it's really an average to ensure some kind of cost recovery for the provision of services. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Director Stamford.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry if this is explained somewhere else, but there is in the table on page 2 of the report is something called special purpose bulk water meter. I can't imagine what that is. Can you give me an example of what that looks like on the ground for properties without water service connections to utilize water via fire hydrants, $100 per week? I just don't know what that would look like.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Chair. This is related to provision that's currently included in the draft bylaw 778 that allows the SRD to provide water to people or to companies or to entities from a hydrant. Currently, if there's a construction company doing construction activities on a property and there's no water service available yet, they can take it from the hydrant, and currently we're not charging for that. So currently it's unrecorded. So there's a provision in the bylaw and policies are being developed to, and they will be brought forward next year to actually start recording and collecting fees associated with that use. And that's important because what we try to get a handle on is how much water is actually being used, and currently it's unrecorded use, and that's what we're trying to address. And the fees proposed in this bylaw are just, will only be in place when we actually have the policy in place.
Thank you. Director McMahon and then Director Lee.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the water meter test fee. So $1,300 is quite a lot for a householder to put up. If I think that my water meter is not working properly, what would be the steps that would be taken after I contact the SCRD?
Thank you. What will be done at that point? If people apply for their water meter to be tested, we actually replace our water meter. We send the old one to a testing authority, and if it's within 2% of the accuracy, then it's confirmed to be good. And then we keep the deposit, because then we spend a lot of money without that there is any negative results to the actual accuracy of the meter readings. But if it is at fault, then the property owner, if the meter is faulty, then the property owner will receive its deposit back.
Did you have a follow-up, Director McMahon, or? Come back to you, maybe. Director Lee, and then Director Bax.
It's kind of a curiosity question. Do you actually stick a meter physically onto the fire hydrant in that big old, where the hose goes on?
Yes.
Sometimes it's helpful to know how much water, is being consumed by a thing. District of Seashelt, at our non-potable water station, we have a water meter installed there, mostly just for internal tracking purposes, right? Because we don't charge at that water station.
It will be a water meter and a backflow preventer, so that there's no contamination happening from our system.
Thank you. Director Bax?
Yeah, again, on the water meter test fee, I'm struggling with the fact that we need to remove a meter. I understand that if the meter needs to be removed to be tested, that the cost is reasonable. But there must be some other way to test it without actual removal of the meter. Running water into a barrel and then checking the meter before and after to see if it's, you throw 100 gallons or 100 liters and then see if 100 liters has gone through. It would be a less obtrusive test. It would be quicker and cheaper for everybody.
But
But
you can't do that if you're billing using that meter. You actually have to use very strictly regulated procedures. And the idea here is that this is not something that I think even can be done internally. Measurement Canada runs labs all across the country, and they actually will verify the accuracy of equipment for a service fee. And if you're relying on it to bill people, you have to have certified accuracy. Director Gabius?
Yeah, just to add to that, all these tests, I think the property owner could do on their own before they get to that more, intense remedy, I would say. And then the cost is basically a cost recovery, I'm assuming. Like the way I read it, it's like the $1,300 is like the cost of actually removing the meter, replacing it, sending it to the facility and back. So, yeah, I feel like it would have, the homeowner probably has a lot of opportunities to check for leaks themselves. And then if they're still convinced that there is a leak, then they can, or there is a faulty meter. That's how I see it.
so I understand that that there's ways for homeowners to access the data in our water meters. And so we could do like a test of our own within our own system. Is that a possibility? If I suspect that my water meter is not operating properly and is outside of the 2% error, I'd like to know how I would go about, what type of process I could do for self-testing.
Okay, that's a good point. And I know that we do have a spot on our website that tells people how to read their own meters. And so I'm wondering if the staff have any sort of thoughts on how to encourage people to self-test
Before they
before
make a
they
challenge.
make a challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. The easiest way is, as was already suggested, to fill a bucket or a container with a certain amount that you know that there is that's measure. But it needs to be a big amount if you want to do it really accurate to a 2% accuracy. Usually with those kind of methods, you're more in the 10% accuracy. Yeah, it's more or less good. And in general, water meters, it's very hard for a water meter to over-record usually when this voltage is actually under recording. And usually that's early identified by staff because they're like, hey, there's a drop in consumption, what's causing it? Or it's reading 0, where it was reading prior month, and there's still somebody living there, so usually that's a sign of a faulty meter. So it will be very rare for this such a water meter test to be conducted, but we have included the fee and to add in terms of cost recovery, I think it's not even cost recovery.
Thank you. And just, I have been reminded that the purpose for today's meeting is to be talking rates, so we should stay out of the proverbial weeds and sand traps. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I could see that we want cost recovery and we want to discourage people from just saying, test my meter. I'm just a little concerned that it would be a financial barrier to, say, a low-income senior who is worried that the meter may be misreading and is being charged more than they can afford. So I was hoping that there would be some consideration for a low-income household if the need arise.
I don't know if GM Rosenboom has anything to say to that at this point, but.
Not really, other than that, of course, staff, if a resident has concerns about the meter, usually they connect with us by phone, we have a conversation, we can read, we can review data from years back, especially from north and south in the electric areas. And usually based on that, we can provide the residents with a good overview of trends and then confirm if there's a likelihood that the meter is overreading or not. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Director Inkster? Sorry, Director Inkster, do you mind if I go to the CAO first real quick?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just, this is also just items that would be highlighted in the upcoming policies that we talked about a couple meetings ago. So these would be the details associated with those. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Inkster?
Okay. So I understand we're trying to keep the discussion of rates, but, and I was listening to some of the critiques that were being put forward in terms of the extra costs that someone would incur. The argument that I do buy is when Director McMahon says somebody that's retired who is worried that they're being overcharged or there's too much water being consumed, because we know, because we can, garbage as an example, that when you're a single retired person, you're not using a lot of garbage service. You're not necessarily recycling a lot, nor would you be consuming a lot of water. So there's two things going on there, affordability, but also obviously staff. And this is the, through you, Chair, to staff is where we need to be, how would I say, reasonable, but also that other word where you feel for people. Empathetic, there's another word that I was thinking of, but empathetic and for staff to go, okay, you may have a good point. We're not going to move towards you expecting you to pay $1,300 when you're a senior that probably consumes 150 liters a day.
Right. Thank you. Any other discussion? Compassionate. Thank you. Any other discussion from directors? If not, we do have recommendations on page 1 of the report. Director Gabius?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations on page 3 of the agenda.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that, a couple of them. Any further discussion? This is voting A, B, D, E, F, and C shalt. If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Bax is opposed. That motion's carried. Thank you. All right. Now that that's done, we'll move on to item 4.2, which is Regional Water Service Area 2026 rate bylaw amendment. I'm not sure who's going to take the lead on this, whether it'll be, okay. Manager Doyle has been tasked to take the lead on this one, so we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. We've prepared a short presentation to accompany each of the water rate reports in front of you today. There you go. The purpose of what we're discussing today, setting water rates, is to establish sustainable revenue for these services. Sustainable revenue for a water service aims to generate enough income each year to operate, maintain, and replace aging infrastructure without creating financial shocks for ratepayers and future boards. So this chart on the screen in front of you today shows how the replacement value of regional water system is currently distributed across 5 condition categories, and how that distribution is expected to shift over the next decade. The darker bars on the top of each pair represent 2023, when the majority of the system's replacement value landed in the good and fair categories, with only a small portion in poor or very poor condition. Over the next decade, much of the system's value is expected to move from good and fair towards poor. This does not indicate that the system is failing. It reflects the natural aging of infrastructure. As these assets get older, they move down in the condition scale unless they are renewed or replaced. The key point is that the system is currently stable and there's time to manage its trend. This is less about a crisis and more about planning. The chart provides a clear indication that earlier and steadier reinvestment is critical to manage aging assets effectively.
Now I'd like to take a moment to go over the 3 options that have been presented in the staff report before you. Option number 1 proposes a $21 increase to parcel tax in addition to the $44 required to fund the $500,000 contribution that was approved at that October 27th Budget Committee, for a total parcel tax increase of $65. This would result in approximately $750,000 in additional parcel tax revenue, or about 3/4 of the $1 million recommendation in the October 27th Regional Water Service Capital Plan Update. Option number 2 proposes a $44 parcel tax increase to fund the approved $500,000 contribution. This option would result in about half of the $1 million recommended lift. Option number 3 proposes a $37 increase in addition to that $44 for a total parcel tax increase of $81. This option would result in approximately $927,000 in additional parcel tax revenue, or approximately 93% of that $1 million parcel tax lift that was recommended. Thank you. Considering the projected costs of future infrastructure needs, it is important to establish a healthy capital reserve. The charts here depict the additional reserves each option proposes to contribute over a 10 and 20-year time horizon, assuming a 3% yield on investments. You can see that over a 10-year period, option number 2 results in approximately $6 million in additional reserves. The same reserve contribution can be achieved in 7 years in option 1, or just under 6 years for option 3. With the assistance of compounding interest, the discrepancy in reserve accumulation is further exacerbated when looking over a 20-year time horizon, where option 2 produces just under $13.8 million in additional reserves. While the same reserve accumulation can be achieved in 14.5 years in option 1 and nearly 12 years in option 3.
So just a bit more context, zooming out a bit, we wanted to revisit the long-term outlook and look at the challenges ahead as we grapple with decisions today. The chart here shows when the system's major renewal and replacement costs are expected to occur. Each bar represents a single year from 2026 to 2075, and the height of the bar is the total capital cost anticipated for that year. The colored segments show different asset types, mains, dams, treatment plants, and so on. The highlighted section of this chart on the left shows the next 8 to 10 years that we discussed previously. While we do anticipate a significant transition in asset condition, these early years contain mostly small, manageable projects. The total capital renewal expenditures anticipated in this period is approximately $30 million, which is relatively small compared to the much larger renewal waves later on. By gradually increasing investment now, while the needs are still modest, we can soften the impact of the larger renewals shown in the later decades. There's an opportunity here to get ahead of these predictable long-term costs. And staff are available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Director Inkster.
So the graph over a number of years we've seen before, and we've obviously, yourself has presented them, sent them to our council, because I'd like for people to see what the cost will be over a number of years. Although I think just they maybe at that point the vice chair and the chair may be the only ones left when some of those come in. We know that, but I'm assuming. But when we talk about these figures going forward and what it looks like, it's pretty scary. Other than because the argument is being made that we now should look at funding now to get ahead of some of those costs. That's the argument that I heard presented. What I start to want to see and ask for is an inflation figure. I'll give you an example. The BARD one that was back there, it shows there's one that was $150 million, right? So what is that in today's dollars? Would that have been $25 million today? I mean, we saw a big bump the last number of years. It's just to put everything in context, because it's pretty scary as we prepare for some of these costs. So those are the questions I start to ask. What's the inflation cost? You know, we've seen what I've noticed in the last few years, other than the tax rates jump up in the last few years, which in Seashell, which is quite scary, is the costs of things. Our costs actually of doing the same services for the last 20 years has pretty much doubled. So is it going to double again? Those are the kinds of things that I keep in mind. It's a little bit off track to what we're talking about because we're talking about the next few years, but it would be good to have that financial picture, Chair, in order to make those decisions to say to people, there will be an inflation factor, there will be costs. You know, a loaf of bread could be $30 in 2050. You know, those kinds of things. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Inkster. I don't know that there was necessarily a question in there that staff can answer right now, but certainly something to be looking at as we move forward with communicating out to people what these things are going to mean and how we move forward. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I would like to move staff recommendations on page 12. I'm not necessarily a big fan of building up large reserves, but for our water system, it is really obvious that we need it.
So those are the recommendations that are on page 1 of the staff report itself? Yes. Okay, thank you. And I've got a seconder for that. Directors, any discussion on the motion that's currently on the floor? This is voting A, B, D, E, and F, A, B, D, E, F, and C Schelt again. I don't see any hands. I will call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. And so with that, we're going to move on to, my apologies, Director Lee.
I think the one question was unanswered, but I do believe that from previous presentations that there has been an inflation factor built into those figures on the outlying years. So I didn't want that question to go unanswered.
And I saw Manager Doyle nodding. Did you want to provide a little more context?
Yeah, thank you from the chair. We use a 3% inflation to presume growth. And that's based on historical research and looking at what we've seen in the past. And about every 20 to 25 years, the cost of a project will double using that value. So that's the impact of inflation, if that helps kind of rule of thumb.
Thank you. 3% annually is what they're using for the projections, and the cost of a project doubles approximately every 20 to 25 years. So
3% on top of 3% compound, obviously.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Okay, moving on to item 4.3, which is the North Pender Harbor, CAO?
Just to confirm, time value of money is built into those graphs, and they're built into all of our capital plans. So we try to forecast in on a regular basis what we expect something today, which I think is what some of the director's point is, into those years' dollar.
All right, moving on to item 4.3, which is the North Pender Harbor Water Service Area Rate Bylaw Amendment. And back over to Manager Doyle.
Thank you. We have a similar presentation to share again. So this has a similar message and structure as the last. It should get easy to follow. Both Pender Harbor water systems are transitioning to volumetric billing this year, so the user fee in the next two reports is presented slightly differently. The same core purpose drives the options presented in the report in front of you today, the desire to establish sustainable rates for our core services. This chart, like the last one, shows the replacement value for the North Pender Harbor water system assets and how they're distributed across 5 condition categories, how that distribution is expected to shift over the next 10 years. Like the other systems, we see the transition of infrastructure condition from fair or better to poor or worse. There's a little bit more immediacy in the data we see here versus regional water. But the positive takeaway here is that in 10 years, the majority of the infrastructure still remains to be in fair or better condition. A key point for this graph is that there is an immediate and ongoing need to replace aging infrastructure, but the problem is manageable.
So staff have proposed a new basis for the imposition of parcel tax to conform with legislation whereby a property's parcel tax rate will be determined based on on their total acreage. This proposed classification results in an $8.87 increase to approximately 90% of parcels. This rate has been included in the total increase for each of the options that have been presented before you today. So option number 1 proposes a $106 increase to parcel tax, in addition to the $59 required to fund the $45,000 contribution that was approved at the October 27th Budget Committee, for a total parcel tax increase of $174. This would result in over $127,000 in additional parcel tax revenue, or just under half of the $270,000 recommended lift to establish a sustainable funding level. Option number 2 proposes an additional $59 parcel tax increase to fund that $45,000 approved contribution. This would result in approximately 17% of the recommended contribution to establish a sustainable funding level. And then finally, option 3 proposes a $156 increase in addition to that $59 parcel tax increase, for a total increase of $224. This would result in approximately $166,000 in additional parcel tax revenue, or approximately 62% of that recommended funding increase to establish a sustainable funding level. So again, considering the upcoming infrastructure needs, it's important to establish a healthy capital reserve. The charts seen here, similar to the previous presentation, depict the additional reserves each option proposes to contribute over a 10 and 20-year time horizon, and again, assuming a 3% yield on reserve investments. You can see that over a 10-year period, option 2 results in approximately $500,000 in additional reserves. The same reserve contribution can be achieved in under 4 years for option 1 and approximately 3 years for option 3. And again, with the assistance of compounding interest, the discrepancy in reserve accumulation is further exacerbated when looking over that 20-year time horizon, where option 2 produces approximately $1.25 million in additional reserves. The same reserve accumulation can be achieved in 8.5 years in option 1 and 6.5 in option 3.
So again, we're looking at the long-term outlook for North Pender Harbor, provide a greater context for the state of the infrastructure there. This chart's showing the same information when the major infrastructure renewal is expected to occur across the next 50 years. The highlighted section on the left of this chart shows the next 8 to 10 years that we discussed previously. This high-level analysis suggests that the total capital renewal expenditure anticipated across this period is approximately $5 million. Just want to point out that this projects to be the lowest investment required in any 10-year period on this chart. So the key message today is that the system is generally stable. The next several years have relatively modest renewal needs, which creates a window to plan and adjust investment levels before we encounter the larger renewal needs in the future. And staff are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I will look first to Director Lee, as it's his area.
Just confirmation that my math was correct. On page 31, I figured out the user fee to be around $1,034 a year. I took the $850 and multiplied 4 by 46 and ended up with the user fee. So that's an average user fee for a resident.
So I thank you for the question from the chair. The average user fee, I don't have that information in front of me. It would be the overall operating budget divided by the number of users would be the easiest way to get there. If someone uses less than 46 cubic meters a quarter across all 4 quarters, they'll pay $850, and any consumption above that threshold would be billed on it. So I hope that provides an answer. I think you're close.
Yeah, I was trying to compare year over year, of course, and so I needed a user fee, which, if I have it right, that's kind of good, because then I work out to around a 13% increase total in the bill. So with that in mind, I will make a motion to accept the recommendations as put forward on page 25.
Which is page 1 of that particular report.
Yep.
So thank
Page
you.
1 of that
And
report. But
I've got a seconder for that. This is voting all directors because it's a single participant service. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And next up, we're going to move on to item 4.4, which is South Pender Harbor Water Service Area Rate Bylaw Amendment. Back to Manager Doyle.
Thank you. Another riveting presentation to accompany this report. Similar message and structure as the last. These systems share many of the same challenges and some unique elements that require a nuanced response. The core message remains across the board. Invested in asset renewal is essential to the long-term sustainability of these services. So the chart for South Pender Harbor, similar to the ones we saw in previous presentations. What we can see here differently is the system is already carrying a large portion of lower condition assets. The projection shows that even more of the system's value will continue to slide from the fair into the poor and very poor categories over the next decade. This doesn't indicate immediate failure, but it does show that the window for stabilizing the system's financial situation is narrower than the other systems. The trend reflects the natural aging combined with limited renewal action to date. The key points are that this system is still functioning, its condition trending downwards, and that acting sooner can help prevent a large project backlog and reduce long-term risks and costs to the system.
Now looking at the options that have been presented before you. So option number 1 proposes a $115 increase to the parcel tax in addition to the $95 required to fund the $100,000 contribution that was approved at the October 27th Budget Committee. This would produce a total parcel tax increase of $210. Ultimately, this would result in approximately $226,000 in additional parcel tax revenue, or about 38% of the $600,000 recommended to establish a sustainable funding level. Option number 2 proposes an additional $95 to fund that $100,000 contribution, which would ultimately result in approximately 17% of the recommended contribution to establish a sustainable funding level. Finally, option number 3 proposes a $180 increase in addition to that $95 for a total of $275. This would result in approximately $297,000 in additional parcel tax revenue, or just under 50% of the recommended funding increase required to establish a sustainable funding level. Similar to in past presentations, we must consider the upcoming infrastructure needs, and so therefore it's important to establish a healthy capital reserve. The charts seen here depict the additional reserves each option proposes to accumulate over a 10 and 20-year time horizon, assuming again a 3% yield on reserve investments. You can see that over a 10-year period, option number 2 results in approximately 1.2 million in additional reserves. The same reserve contribution can be achieved in just under 5 years in option 1, or just over 3 years for option 3. Again, with the assistance of compounding interest, it gets further exacerbated over a 20-year time horizon, where option number 2 produces just under 2.77 million, while the same reserve accumulation could be achieved in 10.5 years through option 1, or nearly 8 years in option 3.
So again, back to the 50-year outlook for South Pender. Each bar representing the expected expenditures for that year. The section on the left highlights the period from 2026 to 2033. In this system, the early years do include several notable renewal expenditures, with nearly $20 million in expenditures anticipated over the next decade. These early costs are largely driven by mains replacements. Many of these are already reaching the end of their useful lives. Increasing the investment over the near term can help stabilize the condition profile, reduce the share of poor and very poor assets, and prepare the utility for the larger renewals scheduled in the 2040s and beyond. This chart does not indicate immediate failure, but it does show why a more proactive approach is recommended. And staff are here to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Lee first, and then I might have a question based on that last slide that we saw, so.
Might be the same question as me. I am aware that our asset management plans are not actually that detailed yet. When I compare them to the wastewater, for instance, which I know we've had a really good hard look at. Is the anticipated main replacement program available? In other words, can I know which ones are probably next to fail?
Fail is not the right word there, but I'll look over to GM Rosenboom.
I saw some faces turning to me. So yes, the plan has not been finalized yet. We are one of the inputs to finalizing the plan is also the fire flow action plan, because there might be mains that are maybe based on their asset renewal scheduled to be replaced in 5 years or in 10 years, but they might be expedited to address fire flow needs. So that's one of the inputs that we need to finalize before we can finalize the water main replacement plan for the upcoming 10 years in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. My question was much more specific. Did you have a follow-up, Director Lee? Well, that last slide that we saw showed 2056 with a massive blue bar, which I think was representative of intakes, if I saw that correctly. And it like outstrips almost every other expense on the chart. And so I was just curious as to what that particular project would likely entail, recognizing that's not the purpose of today's meeting, but I don't know if Manager Doyle knows offhand.
Thank you for the question. The bar, as you identified, is likely the intake for the lake there, and given its position in the time frame, it's going to be about double or more the cost of what we expect currently. We factor in contingencies for archaeology, environmental, and structural engineering, and all the components that are involved, as well as the demolition as the other one. So it could be a fairly comprehensive project. I don't have the specific details in front of me today, but that would be my kind of high-level understanding of what that represents there.
Thank you. Okay, and I mean, it goes to highlight exactly how easily one project can consume the entirety of the capital plan in 1 year, right? It's one thing if you're replacing a lot of things within your capital plan in a year, but one particular project can easily consume Director Stanford.
I'm just making sure that this presentation of the 3 different forms will be available on our Let's Talk site. It's a good reference for community members.
Thank you. And
DeAndrade.
Director De Andrade, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's just a question about the loan. A 20 years loan is super expensive, right? It's pretty much double. So my question is, if for any reason we are collecting enough reserves, is there a way of paying off in less time, like you have options when you do a mortgage for a housing, right? I know there's a cap where you can pay back faster, but I just wonder if this type of loan, you can do the same.
Manager Taylor.
Yeah, with long-term borrowing, after the first 10 years, the local government does have that option to reopen that loan and pay it back.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Director Lee, it's your area. I'll turn to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was doing the user fee again, using the 46 and the $4, and I come to almost a, let me just visit this, 12% increase in the user fee, which seemed a little high. I'm not, is there something in particular? I show that it was $925 in 2025 and $1,034 in 2026.
Sorry, Director Lee, I'm trying to find the page.
You won't find them.
Oh,
It's but it's based on page 56,
okay.
the chart on 56.
And I think, I don't have those page numbers handy, so. Okay,
It's option 1 on the chart that was up there when it said option 1, option 2, and option
Right.
3.
and I think similar to the last one, this is that thing where if a property owner is using less than that 46 cubic meters, they're gonna see $850 as their user fee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, I don't know, was there
But
any,
it was lower in 25 for South Pender. So
but there's also.
I'm probably okay with it, but it's just when I add the two together, I come up with a 20% increase for South Pender instead of 13%. So, and North Pender's probably in worse shape than South Pender.
Manager Doyle?
So the user fee that's shown there is for a typical connection. And then the actual overall cost of the service is going to depend on consumption, as you pointed out. On page 54, you can see the user fee from 2025 was $925 for the typical residential connection. So people who consume less than the allowance will see a reduction in their rate compared to the previous years. It's really hard to compare apples to apples as we transition to volumetric billing. So I think a good way to look at it is the operating budget for the service does increase year over year. And that is going to be, reflected in the user fees. But the average user fee is only increasing by as much as that operating budget increases year over year.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Yeah, that is the problem of moving to volumetric billing, and we have to be able to recover our costs because we can't borrow for operations. So if we err on the top side, that's a far better thing to do. So I'm good with that. You guys are going to be answering that yourself next year.
Would you like to make some recommendations, Director Lee?
Yes, indeed. I'd like to accept the recommendations as listed on page 52 or page 1 of the individual report.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. Again, single participant service, this is voting all directors. Is there any other discussion on the motion that's currently on the floor? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Manager Doyle.
Is it still me?
So next up,
How can I
we
keep
are
up?
going to move on to item 4.5, which is quarterly billing for sewage treatment facilities in electoral area A. And GM Rosenboom, I see you coming to the front, so I assume you're going to be introducing this one today?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will. Currently, we're building wastewater facilities also on an annual basis. For cost effectiveness in terms of our administrative and billing processes, it's recommended that for the wastewater treatment plants located within the North and South Bend areas, they also go through a quarterly billing process, which would allow, from an administrative and billing practices perspective, some cost efficiency, and for the residents to actually get a similar format of bill every quarter. So staff are recommending that transition for the plants within the North and South area. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is basically just an administrative adjustment in how everything is billed. Director Lee?
Yes, I hadn't really thought of it ahead of time, but it seems logical to me that we bill everything ongoing, and it's probably good for people to pay a little bit each year, even though I'm one of those that would rather just pay a lump sum at the end. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 64 of the overall, or page 1 of the individual report.
Thank you very much. And Director McMahon, I see you seconding that. Again, this is voting all directors. This is all Area A at this point. So I guess next year we'll be looking at the same thing for the systems that are in the rest of the region. So I will call the question if there's no discussion on this. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right, so next up, we have the 2026 wastewater user fee overview. Just here for information, but GM Rosenboom, was there anything you wanted to speak to in this?
No, thank you, Chair. This, as indicated, this report is primarily for information, and compared to several years ago, the wastewater facilities are almost in a very good financial condition. So no fee changes are recommended, except for one, which is addressed in a separate report.
Thank you. And I know, in the past, when we were looking at all these big increases, there was a lot of turmoil around it, let's say. But I think seeing this number of services that are proposed to remain the same, I think is a good example of getting to that point of sustainability, at least in the medium term. Directors, do I have any questions? Director Stanford?
Thank you, Chair. My question pertains to the Langdale waste system. There's two parts to it. Number one, is the ratepayers for this particular system, are they paying extra to be part of a secondary system because of the condition of this septic field? And also, once the new system is put in place, because I would assume the maintenance costs would go down with a new system, could we see a slight reduction in their yearly costs?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. In terms of if the cost of a new system will go up and down, that's to be determined based on the ultimate design. It could go down, it could go up. For example, on Wood Creek Park, which is in a similar situation, we might actually see it going down compared to several years ago. However, we also would need to factor in, of course, inflation and those kind of factors. So it might more stabilize than actually going down. In terms of are residents now paying double? No, that's not the case, because there's almost no cost associated with our own system.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions from directors? If not, we will move on to item 4.7, which is the Lee Bay Wastewater 2026 User Fee Review. And GM Rosenboom.
Thank you, Chair. For this particular wastewater service, we're recommending a slight increase in the user fee. Over the last several years, we've incurred deficits, and for this year, there's another deficit, operational deficit, projected for that service. over the last several years, we've balanced that out by using operating reserves to cover the deficit. And we're now recommending an increase in the fees because to avoid a further reduction of the deficit below a level that we don't feel that it is warranted given the value of the assets and the potential cost for any major unforeseen issues with the plant. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And just before I go to Director Lee, I'll jump in real quick with a question in that I don't particularly remember the last couple of years. Were we anticipating the operational costs coming down to not be in deficit, or were we specifically depleting some of those operational reserves?
Thank you for the question. A fair question. No, we indeed deliberately depleted some of the reserves because they were on the high end.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but I couldn't remember, so thank you for the confirmation. Director Lee?
There's been a few little things that have failed that were kind of unanticipated, and you end up using expenses to fix them. And so it was drawing it down, and you keep hoping you're not going to get them the next year, but it's happened too many years now, so I'm actually good with it. It's around a 15.8 for user, and the total is about a 9.21. So not something I like, but it's something that's unavoidable. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as listed on page 72 of the written or page 1 of the individual report.
Thank you, Director Lee, and I've got a seconder for that. Yeah, big jump, well, big-ish jump for 1 year, but if you think about the rates haven't changed since 2022, it's a catch-up more than anything. So any discussion on the motion on the floor? If not, this is all directors, single participant service. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Next up, we will move on to item 4.8, which is solid waste facilities tipping fees review. And I see Manager Soul coming to the front.
Hi, thank you. I have a very short presentation to review. So before the committee today is some proposed changes to our sanitary landfill bylaw 405 with increases to tipping fees and in one case holding tipping fees steady, as well as some new tipping fees for a potential program that'll be brought forward during the 2026 budget process. So just to review some of the proposed fees, back in July of this year, the SCRD entered into a multi-year partnership agreement with Salish Oils, and that included food waste and wood waste, both at Pender Harbor Transfer Station. This agreement impacted the direct costs associated with both services, hence the proposed tipping fee increases. Additionally, the SCRD recently entered into a new contract for scrap metal recycling, and that contract has lower costs than what are currently borne by the regional district. And so in order to reflect that, we are proposing to remove the scheduled increases for 2026 and 2027. We also intend to review how the new contractor is working out. There's the potential for future decreases in tip fees coming in future years. Additionally, we also have a potential new program that'll be brought forward during the budget process, as I said, and that is for furniture recycling. Some of the data for this program is quite positive when it comes to extending landfill life, and so we are proposing these fees at this time in order to implement the pilot program in 2026, should the board approve the budget proposal, which would gain us an additional 2 weeks of landfill life rather than waiting until 2027. Staff are available to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Directors, Director McMahon.
Every time I read one of these reports, I learn something. Medical beds. Medical beds? Holy cow. Is there no kind of a recycling or refurbishment program for medical beds? That seems like a terrible waste to be throwing them in the landfill.
Essentially, the only one I'm aware of is this proposed recycling service, and it is a very, from what I've heard, a very complex product, given that it contains foam, metal, electronics, and like a lot of electronic products, they're not necessarily designed to be refurbished or repaired, and so when they are at the end of their life, recycling is probably the best thing we can do rather than landfilling.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a clarification question, and my apologies if I'm just misinterpreting the report here. The increases that are being proposed for wood waste, is that across the entire system, or is that just through the Pender Harbor Transfer Station?
That is just for Pender Harbor Transfer Station. Salish Soils took on the management of wood waste at their facility here in Seashelt, and so fees are set by them. The regional district doesn't manage that service any longer, but we do manage the wood waste at Pender Harbor, and so these fees are just reflecting the transportation cost increases we saw in the partnership agreement.
This might be a mostly self-solving problem because it might become cheaper for residents to drive their wood waste down to Seashelt and run some other errands while they're down here. But directors, any other comments or discussion? Director Lee, it's you look like you've got something, but go ahead.
I'm quite curious about the furniture. It's right now we recycle mattresses, but we pay because the government doesn't subsidize it, even though I think they should. Like all products should be charged extra at the beginning. Is the furniture going to be funded by us, or is the government going to do one of those user or manufacturer pay?
Go ahead.
So furniture recycling, much like mattress recycling, would be funded entirely by the regional district. As the committee may be aware, the province recently decided to decline adding mattresses to the recycling regulation, which would have led to the creation of an extended producer program for mattress recycling. The hope with that program was that it would eventually be expanded to furniture recycling. That's also another item that's been called for by many local governments in the province. So our hope is that one day these will become stewardship programs, but as of now, much like with mattresses, the costs would be entirely on the regional district.
Thank you. And my last question is a clarification one. If I can find the page here. On page 80, it says that there's a little, in the middle of the page, it says $5 minimum charge still applies per Schedule B, Section 4, Bylaw 405. So there will still be a minimum charge for me taking my organics. And so I can have 10 pounds of organics on my truck and 50 pounds of garbage. I just go through the scales once. That'll still be, okay, thank you.
That is correct, yeah. So the average user of this food waste service shouldn't actually really be paying anything more than what they are paying now if they show up with their little kitchen catcher bucket of food waste.
Great. Thank you very much. Directors, Director Stanford.
I'm just wondering how these increased charges, will they impact the budget for the annual islands cleanup?
Thank you. So we don't intend to collect furniture through the islands cleanup program. Well, I'll never say never. But it is primarily a space issue when it comes to the barge and everything. So it may be that in future years, instead of mattresses, we may do furniture, but that may mean that it's a longer gap between mattress collections. So those are all factors to consider when we reevaluate that program.
Great. Thank you very much. Directors, Do I have anybody willing to move some recommendations? Director Lee?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 78 and 78, 77 and 78 of the written, or page 1 and 2 of the individual.
Perfect, and I've got a
4.8.
seconder for that. Thank you. This is voting all directors. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Excellent. Thank you. And with that, we will move on to item 4.9 in our agenda, which is refuse collection 355 2026 fee review. And back to Manager Soul.
Thank you. So before the committee today is some proposed increases to our curbside collection rates in reflection of the new contract that the SCRD entered into last year for garbage and just recently for organic waste collection. I also just want to point out that there is a minor error on the tables. The rate, the 2025 rate for mobile homes in a mobile home park should be $179.36, not $181.16. Similarly, the same table in option 2 should also be corrected. However, the proposed percent increase as well as the proposed rates for 2026 are actually correct and did use the correct rate for mobile homes. Staff are available to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. And I was halfway through, Loree, trying to figure out where that other number was before I realized that with the eScribe system, the agendas were probably updated and we didn't even realize it. So, directors, any questions about the staff report or discussion or recommendations? Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to move the recommendations on page 106 of the agenda.
Thank you, and I've got seconders for that. It says voting all directors, but is 355 rural areas only?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is rural directors only.
Thank you very much. So, see Sheldon Gibson's have to sit this one out. Oh, and not Area A either. Thank you. So this is B, D, E, and F. All right. Any, thanks for the thumbs up from Manager Wing. Any discussion from directors? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. And thank you very much. And that takes us to the end of our agenda. We have no communications, new business. We have no in-camera. Look for a motion to adjourn, please, directors. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you, staff. Any questions from online? If not, okay, we'll see you at the next one.